If we were to entertain the notion that a machinic intelligence could be an integral component of a living architecture, then we're confronted with contradictions and nested paradoxes fairly quickly. My name is Alex Webb. I teach architecture at the University of New Mexico. I'm a licensed architect, and I'm currently pursuing a Ph.D. at the European Graduate School. And I'm coming to ideas and structures of artificial intelligence effectively as a naive. I was struck by the stringent role humans play in machine learning. Whether a neural net is constructed through a supervised, unsupervised, or reinforced learning structure, there's a very constant and very rigid form of oversight deployed by the human in this model. And while this may be benign or perhaps even beneficial in some situations, as it certainly conflicts with ideas of living, and when deployed upon the urban scale, it's having massive ramifications. The cities arguably consume 70% of our resources as a species, and computational deployments, as demonstrated through corporate entities such as UPS, have shown massive resource savings. So this is an incredible position within the front lines of fighting global climate issues. Yet the structures of smart cities are not, in terms of intelligence, are not totally vetted as of yet. A smart city can be thought of as a inhabitable sensor array, basically a giant repository and recording device for human behavior and human movement that's funneled into a central server bank. The information is then parsed through and then presented to humans for humans to decide what to do. What's missing in this equation is actuators, capacity for the intelligence to be able to demonstrate or explore physical space or test theories and boundaries. So if we're to look at this as a diagram and in terms of an analog to a kind of intelligence, this isn't even a mammalian intelligence. This is a mammalian intelligence in a vegetative state. There are no muscles to carry out any actions. There's no learning from experience. This is simply recording information and then presenting it to a human, which is absolutely by design. An executive who was working on IBM's Smart City project in Rio de Janeiro said in an interview, "Once you have the information, you're halfway to smart." Which is another way of saying, once we have the data, we'll know what to do with it. But there's no process for the machine to actually explore what to do with it itself. And as we start to see distributive cognitive systems infiltrating urban environments through platforms such as Uber or the Nest, we're confronted with another paradox, which is if we train our neural nets simply through the experiences, simulations, and criteria that we provide them, then they become incredibly brittle. They're basically introduced to a new component, a new context within the situation, and the entire system breaks. With a Roomba, this is mildly hilarious. With a Tesla autopilot, it's tragic. So, as we're thinking about not only how we construct feedback for the machine, I think it's also important to question how the machine learns. And I've been studying artificial intelligences and constructing very low-level neural nets. I'm finding myself wondering, is there a way to actually have machines pose their own problems and create their own criteria for that? And there's an interesting analog to this, the human dream. Some studies claim that non-REM dreams are effectively replays of previous experiences and rehearsals for slight deviations from what we did to be able to practice and do better. REM dreams, those are the weird ones, are mashups, composites of previous experiences potentially combined with things like intergenerational traumas and biological instincts that pose situations that we have not yet dealt with, so that when we come to other situations that we have not yet encountered, we're predisposed to better solve those. Effectively, we're learning from the past, but remixing it in order to better solve problems in the future. A computational equivalent to this is Matthew Lie's chess algorithm Giraffe, which is a deep learning, which is effectively a kind of a more robust neural net. It's the same sort of architecture. Chess algorithm that learns heuristics and strategies rather than the brute force method, which most chess engines are based, which is a process of simulation. Basically, when you play a chess computer, it analyzes every potential move it could make and every counter move you could make and every permutation past that, and then chooses the best probability through its success. This is very computationally taxing and even more brittle when there's new context introduced in the situation. When the machine doesn't have a pre-understood mode of response, it totally breaks. A heuristic program is basically developing of a game plan, what to do in certain situations to be able to respond to them, but then also being able to test out those strategies in novel situations as well. What's interesting to me about Giraffe is that it actually learned and developed these heuristics by playing itself, effectively creating its own context that then it could respond to and test its own strategies and solutions. As a kind of a corollary or a kind of counter approach to this, a project I did last fall is a photo booth app for an AR installation at Albuquerque Somos. This was an application that was a learning neural net for a photo booth, where basically users would have their images manipulated while taking a photo and then tell the machine which ones they preferred. The machine then used that structure to reorganize itself and then take processed mashups of those effectively computational memories, the processed images that it had used, maxed them up, and then processed them again, effectively creating maybe not its own problem, but a closer to its own problem in using criteria it had gained through real-world experiences. Future iterations of this are looking towards actually breaking free of a singular processor and installing basically each neuron within a neural net in a separate processor throughout a spatial construct. That's going to be happening in about 2 weeks at the UNM Art Museum. And looking further from that, giving machine intelligences greater capacities and greater physical agencies to help grow them in the environment. Effectively, I'm looking past this idea of, and trying to break free of this idea that a machine intelligence has to be perfect before we deploy it, and rather put it into the environment sooner rather than later, sort of more like the relationship of a parent to a child. Nurture it, have it grow, give it more increased physical agency so that it can be a much more robust and much more effective ally in solving global problems. Thank you. Questions? Yes.
So you frame your problem within the context of global problems and speaking about UPS finding more efficiencies through the use of what you call machine intelligence. But isn't there a lot of evidence that as those systems would come online, that potentially problems would skyrocket upwards in quantity because of the interconnectedness of things? Like, I'm talking about increased efficiency not resulting in reduction in the outcomes of climate change, but increasing them.
Okay. I see what you're saying. So the UPS example, I think perhaps I should have elaborated on more. Basically, this is incredible. This is proto GPS integration into automobiles, but somewhere around 2007, one guy at UPS figured out that he could save significant amounts of gas by having drivers take 3 rights instead of 1 left. And this has saved UPS millions of gallons of gasoline per year. So I understand your point, though, which is that the presumption is if we create material efficiencies without sort of a responsible kind of cultural construct behind that, basically those material efficiencies will be used or squandered to then have more material efficiencies. So if we develop, arguably, if we develop some sort of carburetor that processes gas much more efficiently, then that's going to absolutely go into Escalades to make them bigger and have them use more resources. That is true. I guess I see my role as more finding the opportunities where potential resource savings could exist. And I'm not necessarily accepting that they won't be bad, but I think there's plenty of people who are working on the cultural side of this to basically enable responsibility and all that. Because you're right. I mean, just making a better widget doesn't mean that people will even use it, much less use it for the ways that the widget is better intends. Yes.
I have a question about the cultural aspect. Your algorithms are only ever as good as the training set. So are you interested in a future where we create a training set that represents all cultures, that could create dreams that represent all possible futures and all possible kind of combinations? Or are you interested in training sets where, let's say, you can represent the dream and cultural background of a North American AI?
Right, yeah, absolutely. And I think what's fascinating is that much of the work around ideas of multiple futures, scenario planning, is absolutely inspired, and really a lot of the fundamental work that I leverage from cybernetics, 100% inspired through Eastern religion. Like, just absolutely fundamentally different worldview happening. So in a way, I would say, like, that's already there, but that's super self-serving as being kind of like North American white guy. And I absolutely, and I realize that, but I'm very much committed towards open source platforms and open source ideologies. I think of this as kind of a small piece in a larger equation, and absolutely do not see it nor intend it to be some sort of kind of agenda, but actually let the system develop its own agenda and let, if it actually serves as a vehicle for a completely different idea of sustainability, I'm 100% open to that, personally.
Thanks so much.
Excellent.